Hi and welcome back to this CNBC Africa special. I'm Chris Bishop. Now we're on the banks of the Hudson River in New York and we're interviewing Steve Forbes, the man whose family built the world famous magazine. What about the China factor here in the United States? How big is that and how influential is it in the economy?
Well, Chinese trade is absolutely essential with the U.S. economy. You take a company like Apple, things like the iPad and a lot of the iPhones are put together in China. They take parts from all around the world, including parts from the U.S., put them in, then ship them over here. So the ties are enormous. And the key thing is, in terms of China, is reducing trade barriers in China, stopping the cyber attacks, stealing of intellectual property. Now those are issues, not the fact that the two economies are very closely intermeshed now.
How likely do you think it could be a problem in the future, maybe, investment from China in?
Well, when China invests here, it means they're dependent on the health of the U.S. economy. When they buy U.S. Treasury bonds, they're giving us hostages. If we ever had a big confrontation with China, you could always call them up and say, those $1 trillion of treasuries, they look awfully nice as wallpaper. And in terms of buying stuff here, if they bought a building, I don't think they're going to take it apart and put it up again in Shanghai. So,
looking at the economy as well, I mean, what do you feel about the signs of recovery that may be out there in the economy right now?
Well, in the U.S., it's very sluggish. You get good reports and then bad reports. It's a car that can't seem to get out of second gear. We're doing better than the rest of the world, but that's not saying much. It's like a race car where you got it up to 50. You're only winning because everyone else is going 35. We all should be going faster.
What do you think should be done to kickstart the economy?
Federal Reserve stopped mucking up the credit markets by allowing the real prices again. Their zero interest rate policies made it very easy for government to borrow and big companies. But that combined with regulation, very difficult for small and new businesses, which are the big job creators. So start letting real markets, stable dollar, reforming our tax code, junking it, putting in something like the flat tax. Healthcare, getting patient control so you can get entrepreneurship in and do to healthcare what we do with everything else.
Now, political change is in the air. How likely is it that any of the candidates are going to be looking at that kind of those kind of measures for the economy?
I think the fact there are so many on the Republican side, so many candidates, they are going to be putting more and more stuff on the table. Some may not go as far as I would like in terms of good reform, but they all know if they don't have something out there, they're not going to get very far. So that creates discussion, debate, and also creates a mandate to get things done. Reagan in 1980 ran on a platform, among other things, of reducing tax rates 30% across the board. People thought he's crazy. Got in, did most of it, and the U.S. economy came back.
And looking ahead to 2016 elections, it is quite interesting. There's some big names there, including Donald Trump. How do you think it's shaping up overall, the elections?
Well, what's become clear is that people are very dissatisfied with what has been done. They're not happy. And so that's why Trump came up. Sanders, Democrats, Senator Sanders, a avowed socialist, doing very well on the Democratic side. I don't think Sanders is going to win. I think the people running against Trump now know they've got to put big stuff on the table to win. So I still think the odds are against the Donald. But what is clear is people want to change. The key thing is to make it a positive change instead of a negative one.
And Ben Carson, the brain surgeon, you say he's an African-American. He's come from a very, he's fought his way up from a very sort of humble background. What chances are that he might come through?
He could, if he doesn't win it, he could very well be vice president. The fact that he's tied Donald Trump in one survey and is doing well in other surveys in Iowa, coming up in South Carolina, New Hampshire, he's got to make some progress, but he's now a real player. He will be in the debates,
what about
future ones.
What about the challenge from the Democratic side?
You still have to give the advantage to Hillary Clinton, even though she's run a very poor campaign, enmeshed in email scandals. Her ratings are terrible. When asked, what do you think of Secretary Clinton? Oh, dishonest, deceitful, cover up, all the things you don't want. But she can still pull it out, particularly if Vice President Biden decides not to run.
You think he might be a better chance for them, Biden, you think?
I think, but I'm not sure he wants to do it, take the risk.
And but overall, you think that the Republicans stand a pretty good chance of winning it next year, but you said that there can always be a twist in the tail. I mean, how do you see it?
Well, the Republicans should have won in 2012 when you looked at the state of the economy. President Obama's high unfavorables. But the thing is, you have to run somebody to do it. And if you have a weak candidate, you can blow it. I think we will have a strong candidate by the time this thing shakes out. So I think the Republicans will win it, but I'm not going to bet my 401k money on it.
Well, you said yourself, wasn't it, that the Republicans have this habit of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory?
Yes.
How likely is that?
I think they learned from 2012, which is one reason why they did well in the 2014 congressional elections. So they're coming up with some good senatorial candidates. And on the Republican side, when you put Trump aside, those candidates, even if they're not lively on a platform, all have substantial records. These are people who've done real things. So I think you still have to give the odds in favor of the GOP, despite its miserable record of winning elections. They should win.
What about the people on the ground here, the people living in a two-bedroom house here? I mean, how dissatisfied are they with the way the US economy is being run at the moment?
There's huge disappointment and wondering, not just disappointment, but the feeling that people don't know what to do. People in authority are floundering, and so they're worried. They don't have it right. I remember the same thing in the malaise decade of the 1970s. People felt they don't know what they're doing. So that leads to anger, leads to worry, and leads to looking at non-traditional candidates.
You mentioned also that you believe that US foreign policy is becoming more isolationist again. What does that mean for continents like Africa?
In terms of U.S. Turning its back on the world, it's not good for Africa. Turning outward to the world means more trade, greater sense of security, which means more investment. Africa has enormous opportunities, even beyond a commodities boom, and a lot of entrepreneurship there. What you need is more and more of an environment where structures where that entrepreneurship can build real assets. And that's where things like the World Bank survey of doing business is helpful, structural changes that you need to make. So the future belongs, people don't realize, there are hundreds and hundreds of millions of people in Africa. It's a big place.
What about the recent visit by President Obama to East Africa? What was your view on that?
He was going to get applause, and he got some. But I don't think he fully recognizes what you need to do to get an economy growing. And Africa's up for it. You take Kenya. Whoever would have thought a place like Kenya would be in one of the forefronts of electronic banking, mobile banking, but they are.
And what would be your advice for foreign policy towards Africa, bearing in mind the opportunity you've talked about and the millions of consumers there and the vast resources and entrepreneurs in the continent?
Well, I think certainly in the north, you've got to have more sense of security and a sense that the bad guys are not going to have the sway in places like Nigeria. And then urge people to put in reforms. You reform the U.S. and say, see, we did it. We were in the dumps. Here's a positive way to do it. What you don't do is let the IMF give the advice. They still give mostly bad advice. Economic malpractice.
What about the entrepreneurs of Africa? I mean, there's a lot more coming up now. What's your view on them, and how key are they, you think, in the continent's future?
Without entrepreneurs, you don't flourish. You don't get the breakthroughs. And there's no lack of energy. It's just up to now, political and economic structures in most countries weren't hospitable to turning that energy into something that's real wealth creating.
And who do you admire from the continent in terms of entrepreneurs?
Well, I think we've written about a number of them, but the key thing is looking at particular countries. Some like Uganda has made some changes, especially given its horrific past. Rwanda, even more horrific. And the key is doing right on things like taxes and property rights.
I mean, if you were the president in Africa, would you say, okay, flat tax from tomorrow?
Yes, I'd do it. And I'd ask the IMF what to do and do the opposite. Putting in a flat tax, tying a currency to, many African countries have already tied their currencies to the euro. So even though those euro's not the best currency, it's better than people trust that more than they do a local currency. So you can say, don't worry about our central bank. We're with the euro or the dollar. So you can invest with a sense of security that you're not going to have a hyperinflation like hit Zimbabwe. And then you do that and you put in ease of starting a business, start practicing real property rights, and you're going to start to see rapidly emergence of a middle class. And
how likely do you think that is, reading the situation from this side?
I think people recognize that foreign aid was a disaster for Africa, and that the Africans are quite capable in a benign environment, economic environment, of prospering. And I think they've already demonstrated that.
Now, the columns of Forbes Africa, they're full of stories about how entrepreneurs have struggled and how they've been knocked back trying to create wealth on the continent. What would you say to an African entrepreneur if they were sitting here right now in terms of motivational?
Well, entrepreneurship by definition means it's not easy, or else everyone would be doing it. And you may get some knocks, but that means you're starting to do something right.
So looking to the future now, I mean, what scares you first about our economic future on this planet?
Wrong-headed economic policy. It's like doctors with malpractice, bleeding patients in the days of old. And when you see countries raising taxes, putting on more regulations, trying to treat their entrepreneurs as piggy banks to steal money from, kleptocrats, that can be discouraging. But I think there again, you get a few countries doing it right and others will follow suit.
And what comforts you at night when you can't sleep? What's good you think about the future looking forward?
Well, sleep is the best comfort. So,
but what inspires you when you look forward into the future of the economies of the world?
That people see what we're doing now is not working. People are searching, and they just got to come up with a few right answers, and they'll be quickly imitated.
And as we said at the start of this interview, you haven't missed a column for 43 years, which is, as a journalist, I can say that's quite something. But what sort of legacy do you want to leave in the world of business journalism?
I think simply carrying out my grandfather's vision, where he said the purpose of business is to produce happiness, not pile up money. And so whether it's books or anything else, laying out how we can create that environment where entrepreneurs can flourish, because when they flourish, we flourish.
I'm afraid that's all we've got time for in this CNBC Africa special. From me, Chris Bishop, on the banks of the Hudson River in New York, it's goodbye.